Leander Rowing Club coming down the course, and of course Stan with encyclopedic knowledge of this event, Henley Women's Regatta. But we've got the next race on the course, 3:06, which is a semi-final of the academic Cox Fours with Glasgow University Boat Club on the Berkshire Station and Manchester University on the Buckinghamshire Station. So not two typical stalwarts of the university rowing scene, but I'm sure they'll be keen to dispel that reputation and make a good name for themselves here on the Henley Women's course.
I think it's great the way that university rowing really has only come on outside of Oxford and Cambridge and Durham in the last 25 years, and there are now 2, maybe even 3 dozen universities who each year produce some decent crews. And I'm really delighted that here on final days in the semi-final we have Manchester and Glasgow. Scottish rowing having a real revival at the moment. Some would say that's the Granger effect, I think. But yes, we can see here no particular advantage to either crew. Maybe just a slight advantage to Glasgow at the moment. On this side, just rowing slightly neater than Manchester. Manchester, just a little wobble in the Manchester boat before the entry, whereas Glasgow rowing on what we call a stable platform, their boat absolutely steady. But of course the commentators' curse works, and I think as they go past the camera, we'll see that they're level.
Absolutely. I think this is what we love to see, close racing here at the Henley Women's Regatta. But I think you're right, Stan, it's maybe the slightest of advantages to Manchester. But I mean, they're pretty much, if anything, no, it's Glasgow, just about half a seat up. So really fantastic racing as they come down the course. And I'm sure, as I say, they'll be trying to think about their race plan and believe in their race plan. But as they came down there, about 300 metres gone in the semi-final of the academic Cox Fours, it was Glasgow with the slightest of advantages, but you could throw a blanket over the 2 crews.
Well, now, this is the first Cox race we've seen today, and as you can see in the Cox Fours, you could be forgiven for asking the question, where on earth is the Cox? Well, the Cox, of course, lies down in the front of the boat, because it's widely believed that by lying down in the front of the boat actually creates less wash and less wake. But also for steering on this course, if you're lying down in the front of the boat, you can actually look down the course and steer off the booms in front, and when you get a little bit closer, you can see the tower of Henley Church in the distance, and you just steer straight for the tower, and those booms are not going to come your way. So where are we doing on the race, Tom? Have we sorted out who's got their nose in front?
Well, it's difficult to see at that camera angle because unfortunately there's a lady on the bank who's slightly blocking our view. But I think it might just be Glasgow still in the lead, and if they can eke out a bit more of an advantage in the middle section of the course, then they'll be sitting pretty as they come past the enclosures here. Of course, the first roars from the assembled crowds on the bank going up, which always signals to us here in the commentary booth that the crews are drawing near. And I'm sure as they come past our little station, we'll be able to see them side on. And I think it is here, Glasgow University stand, who've just etched out a bit of an advantage there.
They just pushed that little bit. If only a couple of inches of stroke, they're pushing, but inch by inch, started at a few feet, and then it's gradually eased, and there we go. As pretty much at halfway, they just got a lengthened 2 foot, 3 foot, and they're just rowing 1 pip higher. There is that balance to strike, Tom, isn't there, between the higher rate and the faster boat speed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think higher rate is always useful because if you're doing it right, if you're maintaining the technique and the form and placing where you should be, higher rate is conducive to faster boat speed. But if you lose your form and you lose your technique, higher rate just spins the boat. It doesn't actually increase the the sub boat speed. So I think there is, you're right, a balance to be struck between those two. But I think Glasgow are doing that well at the moment. They're rating well, striking nice and clean, nice and strong, and they look like they're still moving away from the crew Manchester on the Buckinghamshire station.
They just seem to have slightly more strength with the legs there on the push phase of the stroke, or the draw phase. Here we go, we've got another race, Tom.
Yeah, the next race on the course is another semi-final of the academic Cox Fours, race 3:07, the University of London Boat Club on the Berkshire Station and Worcester University on the Buckinghamshire Station. So I saw this Worcester crew race yesterday, and they have to say they look pretty strong coming down the course. So it'll be interesting to see if they can capitalise on that performance and put one over the University of London, who of course are one of the stalwarts of the university rowing scene and always produce a plethora of extremely strong crews throughout the season.
Well, end of the island, and University of London still at 39 and Worcester at 38. So that's high rating in a Cox 4. It's really hard to get a Cox 4 rolling. Yes, you expect them to golf at 40, but you expect them to crack down to 36s. But clearly both these crews want to put their early marker down. I don't think either of them have succeeded yet. 37 still for University of London. And Worcester, they don't look uncomfortable. And Worcester still got their rate up. Worcester also at 38. These two crews are determined to smash the other ones, but in fact, University of London, again, just seem to have their noses slightly in front there as they come towards our first camera halfway down to Temple Island Meadows.
Yeah, I think that's eagle eyes there from you, Stan. They are just about half a length up. I'm sure they'll be pleased with that. Of course, you've got to ask yourself, between these crews, this is probably the University of London's maybe second or third ranked crew, as this must be Worcester University, due to their size, probably their first crew boated today, or their top crew at least. So I suppose the matchup on paper is a little disparate, but of course the University of London always so strong wherever they compete, and they are showing that form today, just eking out to about 3/4 of the length.
Worcester at 36 and University of London at 34. University of London Boathouse just upstream of where the boat race finishes, just at Chiswick Bridge. University of London at Chiswick, near a lovely part of London called Strand on the Green. University of London been at the forefront of British rowing for 50 years. When I was at school, University of London always produced some Great Britain athletes every year. One of the challenges, I think, for a smaller club like Worcester is, in somewhere like University of London, you're going to have perhaps 20 athletes fighting for places in the top boat, whereas at Worcester maybe they've got a dozen. And of course, competition pushes people and pushes people and pushes people, and you can see it's only marginal. I mean, what's the difference between those two crews? 2 inches a stroke? Not a lot.
But it's decisive, isn't it? 2 inches a stroke, every stroke, and it is slowly making the difference here, because I think University of London have just stretched out. If you look at the bows of both crews, I think University of London probably have clear water now, which is, of course, so decisive in the bigger boats, because once you get clear water and your opposition can no longer see or hear you, they can't see you in their peripheral vision, even if they move their head slightly. I think psychologically the University of London have the edge here.
And we look at the Worcester crew, and there's just that slight. If you go really, really, really hard in that first minute and a half, then you can pay the price. And it just looks as though the Worcester crew's legs are not quite as solid as they might have been at the beginning of the race. And it doesn't need very much slackening off, just a couple of pounds or couple of kilograms of pressure. And you just lose that little bit of run. And you can see now University of London, they broke free that one length, and at that point it's like a psychological hammer hitting you on the back of the head. The crews disappeared, and although the Cox will still be urging them on, they've raised their rate again now, but there's just not quite that consolidated power there in the Worcester crew. University of London, they've got that. They've been able to go down to 32s. Need to be careful though, because Worcester will be gathering themselves. We're about last third of the course now, and maybe the crews are just overlapping again.
Oh, I don't think so. I think there's still University of London continue to have clear water, I think, and as they come down the course, they have dropped their rate considerably, and I think they're just cruising towards place in the final later on this afternoon. But you have to say, I think we're all familiar with that feeling of our legs not responding to our body and not doing what we thought they could do on the ergo and in the weights room throughout the season. But that's University of London cruising towards the win there in our second semi-final of the academic Cox 4. So we'll head straight back up to the start for race 308, which is currently on the state boats now and has just left the state boats. We've got some look at that phenomenal drone footage to take use of this morning. Race 308, the Junior 8 with Latimer Upper School on the Berkshire station and the world famous Headington School on the Buckinghamshire station. And look at that, Headington straight out. And that must be, what, a third of a length already?
Well, I was talking to the coach of my old school yesterday because Latimer had a really, really tough race yesterday. And at the end of the race, which of course Latimer won, they said actually what it was all about was who's going to be cannon fodder for Headington today. And
so it's proving.
Absolutely.
A length already and they're not even at the end of the island. That is so impressive from Headington.
So what is it that Headington have got that means year after year after year they can dominate women's junior rowing?
Well, I have to say I'm lucky enough to know Ryan Domain, Director of Sport in the Oxfordshire School, quite well. And he's very open about the programme, very transparent about what he does there. And obviously they're 8 times winners of the Championship Girls 8 title at the National Schools Regatta, and it's just a method that works well. They're tried and tested, and it's effective, it's efficient, and it always produces world-class athletes year on year. Headington row well together, they row well as a crew. They're not the biggest girls on the circuit, but they're just so in sync, so in unison, and they're trained so well by the coaches there. And they're a tribute to their school, to their athletes, to their coaches. They're a fantastic unit.
Because they're only rating 34 strokes a minute, which is by no means extraordinary. And you look at their stroke isn't particularly long. It's a very effective stroke. They go for the shorter speed through the water style rather than some of the other crews that go for a much longer sustained power stroke. But speed through the water is a hugely effective way, particularly when you've got smaller or lighter athletes. And as you say, they don't look outstandingly bigger than any other crew. Their equipment is pretty much standard equipment. Is it because perhaps they've got a bigger group of people to choose from?
That might well be the case. I think also psychologically, when you've been on top for so long, opposition, they turn up. It's like the Kiwi pair on the international stage. Crews turn up expecting to lose, and with Headington, I think that psychological advantage is playing such a massive part because, they jumped out to a length in almost 20 strokes. That's unheard of in competitive rowing.
I have to say, I'm pleased you brought that up because many years ago, and in fact 40 years ago this year, Thames Tradesmen, just what is now a small club on the Tideway, I think we were in 7 finals on the finals day at Henley Regatta, and there was a belief around the circuit that if you put a tradesman vest on, you went faster. And it looks to me as women's junior rowing now has a similar, the Headington effect. Let's just enjoy watching. We're seeing from our drone camera absolute synchronicity. Don't ask me to spell that word. From the Headington girls crew. It is just lovely to see. It's as good an exhibition of women's junior rowing, actually of women's rowing, that you'll ever see.
Yeah, it is absolutely stunning, you have to say.
What have they taken their rate down to now? They could be out for a Sunday morning paddle. They're rating at 26.
That's tantamount to a training paddle, isn't it now?
And they don't even look like they're at pressure. And yet the distance between them and Latimer, well, I'm not even sure the judges are going to be able to measure it, which means it's more than 5 lengths.
Yeah, utterly dominant there from Headington. And of course, they're just such a force to be reckoned with on the junior rowing circuit. Constantly winners. And I remember watching them at the National Schools Regatta this year, and they were paddling in their semi-final and 2 lengths up and clear of the field. And just looking consummate. That is the only word I can think of. Completely proficient and completely confident in the way they row and the style. And unfortunately for Latimer, who are just appearing in our picture now, closest to you, it's just, come back and fight another day. Unfortunately, you have been outed by just a better crew.
And the thing is, when you're that far behind, you just feel completely disheartened. Well, we're now going to find out who's going to race Headington this afternoon, Tom.
Yeah, it's race 309, our second semi-final of the Junior 8 with Bedford Modern School on the Berkshire Station. And a crew from the USA. I haven't actually got their full name here, but it's National Cathedral, I believe. National Cathedral USA. So it's fantastic to see some US representation here at the Henley Women's Regatta. And of course, the Bedford Modern School crew, locals for me. They are boat out of my hometown. I understand that this crew is pretty much all comprised of junior 17 athletes with a J16 athlete on board too. So a young crew with another year to row. But it looks like this crew from the USA are stepping on here. They're about half length up already, so they will prove a stern test for Headington later on in the day if they were to keep the attentions of Bedford Modern School at bay throughout the course.
Well, I've sneaked a look in the programme, and they're called the National Cathedral School.
Yeah, that's the one. And out on the Buckinghamshire station, they're looking pretty impressive actually. They're already out to a length, and we're about probably 250 metres into this semi-final of the Junior 8s. So let's see how much of a statement they can put out here on the Henley Women's course to Headington and say, look, this isn't going to be a walkover for you. This isn't your monopoly. We're here to upset the form book. We have made the trip across the pond, and we're here for a reason.
And they're paddling at their 37s, which is a very good cruising rate for an 8. Not easy to achieve. Get the rate up to 37 and make it look like it's your natural cruising speed. Tom, I noticed that they're what I was used to call a frig rig. They're stroked on bow side, which is the left-hand side of the boat if you're sitting in the cox's seat, and then they've close coupled 4 and 5 in the middle of the boat. Why would they want to do that?
I have to say, I'm not particularly familiar with coaches' rigging patterns. I mean, I actually did hear a bit of chittle-tattle on the circuit that people who change from the conventional rig are just, they're not focusing on what actually matters, which is, the training of the athletes. But I'm not sure why they'd have rigged their boat like that, because obviously stroke and bow are rowing on the same side.
Well, I've certainly there's been times when I've rigged boats what you might call less than standardly. There is a school of thought that says because 4 of the athletes are pulling the boat round in a circle in one direction clockwise, and the other 4 are pulling it round anti-clockwise, and the boat therefore goes straight because the pressure is even on both sides of the boat. There is a school of thought that says if you look at leverage in mechanics, putting those 2 in the middle of the boat together actually is more likely to make your boats go straight. But certainly as a coach, there are some athletes, I think you'll agree, that naturally row one side or the other.
Absolutely.
And when you've chosen the 8 athletes that are going to make the boat go fastest, it may be that in order to make the boat go in the straight line, you have to not sit them in the conventional seats. However, if you're not sitting conventionally and you've got people close coupled, like 4 or 5 are in the National Cathedral School crew, it is far more difficult to maintain a rhythm, particularly if the water isn't flat.
Yeah.
So it's also high risk. Tom, we've got another